If you have to say goodbye, it's much better to do it in the right way. I don't want a prolonged sickbed or a slow descent into dementia. I've seen that too much around me. I find that so humiliating. I just don't want that.
The Netherlands leads the world in access to euthanasia, but critics have long argued that assisting patients with suicide will lead to abuses from healthcare professionals, and now a new police investigation might support their fears. It's the first criminal investigation since the Dutch legalized euthanasia in 2002. Authorities are looking into 5 cases, including allegations that a doctor drugged a patient's coffee, a woman was physically restrained while getting a lethal injection, and 2 Alzheimer's patients were euthanized without giving legal consent. Well, to discuss this, let's bring in our panel. From Amsterdam, we have Dr. Rob Jonquiere. He's the Executive Director of the World Federation of Rights to Die Societies. And in Utrecht, we have Medical Ethics Professor Theo Boer. And in Southampton, UK, the spokesman for the group Care Not Killing, Alistair Thompson. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Theo Boer, let me begin with you. What's your response to those who say that euthanasia and assisted suicide should be a human right?
I think I have some understanding for that question. But what I think is that when you try to organize that as a country, you will probably get in trouble. And what I mean by that is that we in the Netherlands have had experience for about 40 years of discussing and tolerating this. And what we have seen is that the situation is getting practically out of control. One of the things is that the numbers have more than tripled since we had the euthanasia law. Another thing and we still see no end in the increase. Another thing is that the number of reports, 23% of the euthanasia cases is still not reported. And furthermore, what you see is that the reasons for euthanasia, they keep getting bigger. From the beginning, it was terminal illnesses, just as we can all imagine, cancer in a terminal stage. And now we are talking about people with years to live. And I think that we are getting into a culture in which death is too often seen as the final solution to all our suffering.
Okay, so Rob Jonquiere, when we look at situations where people have late stages of dementia, it's almost impossible to find out what they actually want, and they're being euthanized. When we look at the case of the 19-year-old girl who ordered substance X from the internet and she died, she effectively killed herself legally. It's not hard to see that Theo has a point, right?
Well, I understand why Theo is saying these kind of things, and it is, of course, as always, it is the music the tone which makes the music. I disagree with Theo in the way that it is getting out of control, and I even can say that just by the fact that now this year the prosecuting have started to do investigation into a couple of cases is just proof of the transparency and the carefulness we practice our euthanasia in the Netherlands.
Okay, so Alistair Thompson.
Alistair,
hold on. Rob, just for a second, right? I want to bring in Alistair Thompson. Alistair Thompson, there are laws on the books against murder. If you're a doctor who wants to be like Hannibal Lecter and you want to kill your patients, there'll be an investigation, people will find out, and you'll be tried and convicted of murder, right? It's not to say that you can hide it behind euthanasia, right, Alistair?
No, I fundamentally disagree, and what we've seen is that those people choosing to end their lives are often susceptible to pressure, whether perceived or real, into ending their lives. If you look at some of the other jurisdictions which have done detailed work on why people are choosing to end their lives, I'm referring particularly to the state of Washington and Oregon in the US, over half of both in both states of those people who are ending their lives do so because they fear becoming a burden on their families or caregivers. And I would suspect that the research in the Netherlands is probably very similar, because what we're seeing is, as rightly has been pointed out, it's a dramatic increase from 2002, when under 2,000 people were euthanized in the Netherlands, to 2017, when 6,500 people were euthanized in the Netherlands, including quite a large number, 169 people who were suffering from dementia and over 80 people with psychiatric conditions.
So, Rob, would you accept a tightening of restrictions to make it less easy for people to be euthanized? So the principle is still there, but the abuse is tackled.
Well, the point is, I won't accept it because I don't think it is an abuse. If you talk about, for example, from the UK now, you talk about 169 cases of dementia. It is only 3 cases which are late dementia, and the others are just people who suffer. And the core principle of our law is about suffering. It is not about terminal illness or starting to die. It is the suffering which is important. And people getting in the early stages of dementia are very capable of making decisions like this.
Theo Boer, would you accept that it's still a way to end terrible suffering of people who are really feeling a lot of pain, and that this still is a solution for some?
Yes, I absolutely think that euthanasia can be a solution to some, but the extent that it has taken in the Netherlands, and I think Mr. Jonquiere, how much I respect him, but he denies the seriousness of the rise of the numbers, you see, because not only have the euthanasia numbers risen, but also the numbers of suicides. Unlike in other countries surrounding us, Germany went down 10% in suicides, and the Netherlands, which have euthanasia, went up by 37%. So there is a culture of death that is coming in our country, which I do not like.
Rob, is there a culture of death, and are you denying the seriousness of this escalation?
Well, I don't agree with Theo that there is a connection between the suicide numbers and the numbers of euthanasia. Of course, if you see it as part of a culture of deaths, then I agree that what he's saying. But you can also say that because we have a euthanasia law which is working quite good, actually, you may agree with it or not, but it is working very careful and good. This makes it possible for people to talk about dying and talk about the way they want to die or make choices how to die. And that is also a reason why, because patients are more susceptible to talking about dying, about the way to dying, and doctors have been getting used to applying euthanasia. That is one of the reasons why the number is rising. But I don't think this is just a normal, natural way of rising.
Okay, so you see the escalation as natural. Alistair, let me bring you in here. A lot of people are talking about it openly. Not everybody is in the late stages of dementia. A lot of them are very confident and have their faculties all intact when they say, this is what I want to do. I want to be helped along the way to death. Would you accept that people have a fundamental right to go ahead with that?
No, because I think when you look at the evidence, so in 2009, the Royal College of Physicians provided evidence to the Crown Prosecution Service in the UK, who were looking at the suicide law in Britain. And they very clearly said that it's important, if someone is feeling suicidal, if someone is feeling depressed, that they have support and help and are not given, and I paraphrase terribly, the keys to the drugs cabinet to kill themselves. That is why when the House of Lords in the UK looked at this issue, they said there is no safe system of assisted suicide or euthanasia anywhere in the world. And when MPs voted on this issue again in the UK in 2015, by a whopping majority, they rejected any changes, any weakening in the UK law, which is a prohibition on both assisted suicide and euthanasia.
So, Alistair, is there any condition in which you would, or under which you would actually accept assisted suicide or euthanasia?
No, and I think for very, very clear reasons, because of the pressure that people can feel under because of becoming a burden on their families, a burden on the system. It's important that we have a very clear law, which is we will not help you to die. What we need to do in this country, and we have a massive a problem in the healthcare system which is very strapped for money at the moment, is a debate about how we're going to pay for that. And an ageing population brings in massive challenges. In a couple of decades' time, in the UK alone, we're going to have about 800,000 people with dementia. Now, I believe, and Care Not Killing believes, that we need to answer fundamental questions about caring for them, rather than saying the simple solution is to introduce euthanasia or assisted suicide.
Rob Jonquiere, what do you think Alistair doesn't understand about your argument?
I agree completely with Alistair that if you have a growing number of dementia, and we have the same in the Netherlands, if one of the first issues to look for is to having good care for those people who get demented. The second thing is that, of course, in all the discussions, it looks as if the demented patient says, I want to die, and they just get their euthanasia. Don't forget that the law in the Netherlands says there must be a request from a patient who is capable, have a capacity to say that, and the doctor who has to apply the aid in dying has to agree with it, and is only going to agree with it if he can feel with the patient that the choice the patient makes is the right choice. So that is an extra thing you never hear in the discussions about, that there is still this doctor who has to agree with it. And I can assure you, having practiced euthanasia myself as a family doctor, that it is one of the most difficult things you have to do as a doctor, and you rather try to avoid that decision.
Okay, so Theo Boer, as a final comment here on our panel. We've spoken a lot about the Netherlands, we've spoken a little bit about the United States, a lot about the UK. Theo, is there anywhere in the world right now where you think, in your opinion, they have the balance, that they're doing it right?
I think that some countries, such as Victoria and Australia, are doing a better job by having more strict criteria. But I would say if you consider legalizing, look to the Netherlands and you will see your own future within 20 years. I have seen postal code areas where 10 to 12% of all mortality was euthanasia. Now, Dr. Jonquiere, I know that it is a very hard decision for a doctor, but 10 to 12% of all mortality cases being euthanasia is no longer an exception.
Okay, gentlemen, we're out of time. I'd love to continue because this is really fascinating, it's really interesting, but I have to move on. I thank you all for joining us here on The Newsmakers. Rob Jonquiere, Theo Boer, and Alistair Thompson. All the best.